Hello, I'm Peter Hund. I'm Division Chief of Operations. Today, we want to discuss one of the more important policies we have with the department, and that is the investigator call out. I'm joined today by Chief Dorita, the Fire Marshal, and we're going to go over a couple of important aspects to calling out the fire investigator.
Thanks for having me, Chief.
Anytime.
It's a very important factor what we do when we need to have a fire investigator to the scene. It's been asked a lot of questions lately when we have a policy that clearly spells it out in FRB 101, and it's a good guideline. It lists the requirements of when to call out a fire investigator. So I'll run down the list with you in a couple questions that have been asked of me lately, and I'll try to see if we can answer those as well. One of the first times is evidence that any fire is crime-related or foul play is suspected. So if the incident commander or the company officer, after they've or during their fire suppression activities, notices what looks to be criminal activity, has a suspicion, has the report from a bystander, somebody left hurriedly from the scene or was seen with pouring gasoline on the fire, some of the obvious signs, maybe there's a stolen vehicle involved. Those are when you want to call the fire investigator. All of our fire investigators are deputized to Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department, and they're able to make arrests. Another spelled out in our policy is the loss of life or significant injury. So if someone received burns in a fire, we recently had fire on a patio over the weekend, and one of the victims, it was a plastic plant. They went to move it, and they got second-degree burns on their hands, and they were transported to the hospital by fire rescue. You need to call the fire investigator. We had a child that got a pot. The parents reported that the child grabbed the pot off the stove. It had boiling water in it, and it scalded the child and created second-degree burns on the child. It was reported as an accident, but if there's suspicion involved, it could have maybe not been accidental. Your safest bet in that instance, because there was a burn, call the fire investigator and let them make the determination if they're going to do a follow-up to the hospital. Anytime there's a line of duty death, the fire investigators to be notified. It's going to be overwhelming. The scene, it can be chaotic, so we're going to have multiple fire investigators on a line of duty, death or injury, come out, and we're going to confiscate gear and sequester that. We're going to take pictures, we're going to document, we're going to assist in the determination and the cause. We're going to work with our health and safety people that are coming from other divisions and trying to get a handle on that scene, but definitely that's a call for the investigator. There's accidental fires. If there's substantial monetary loss or structural damage, a lot of question comes, how do we determine the percentage of the structure? The best rule of thumb for this, and we're not, if it ended up only being 18%, nobody's going to get in trouble for calling the fire investigator because they were a couple percentage points off in size. But the best way is square off the structure as best as you can, and divide that into fours, and that gives you a better determination. That'll get you your 25% marks. We also have any crime-related or foul play suspected in the incident requires a fire investigator response regardless of the dollar value. So if there was a fire that you had and it only had maybe $10,000 in damage to the kitchen, but you suspected that it was arson, you have to call the fire investigator. Juvenile-related incidents. Anytime any fire or explosion incident where a person under the age of 18 has a direct involvement in the ignition shall require a fire investigator. But it involved that juvenile having a direct action to the start of that fire, that the fire investigator needs to be called. Explosive devices or an explosion. Anytime that also circumvents the $70,000 amount or the 20%. If there's a fire involving an explosion or an explosive device is found, the fire investigator needs to be called. Then there's the catch-all category, which makes it real easy for somebody. All other circumstances. Fire investigator shall be requested in any fire explosion incident or event in which a fire cause cannot be determined by the fire rescue unit. So if you've got a car on the side of the road, maybe it's a very expensive car, it's one that's in the $100,000 range. We have a Rolls Royce burn up in the parking lot, but a determination can't be made, call the fire investigator. Also, if a sprinkler and suppression system are activated right now, and we're working on changing that a little bit, but for right now, anytime a sprinkler head is activated or the fire suppression system is dumped, let's say at a restaurant, the on-call fire investigator should be notified. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And I know, Chief, from conversations we had, one thing that the crews may not be aware of, but that's securing the scene.
Absolutely, it's an excellent point. The laws have changed. Laws are constantly evolving and things have changed. We used to just be under the assumption that as long as somebody held the scene of authority, meaning a fire rescue unit or a police officer, sheriff's department, law enforcement, basically could hold the scene. That's been basically overturned in court, and what the court is saying and what we are requiring operations to do is when the investigator is notified and they say that they notify the company officer that they're coming out to the scene, fire rescue must remain on scene until they are face to face with the fire investigator, and then they turn the scene over officially to the investigator.
We have quite a few new officers out there, and I know one issue that I have seen come across my desk a lot of times is calls that aren't really structure fires or dispatched fires, more medical calls, but they do meet the criteria of this policy, and sometimes those slip through the cracks. So I'm glad you were here to kind of go over this policy for our new officers.
Send us a question. We'll respond back to you with the appropriate answer. If you don't ask, we won't know that you had that concern or need, and you shouldn't have that question lingering out there. There's an answer for every question, so just email us and we'll get back to you. So thanks again for having us.
No problem. Thanks, Chief. That concludes our talk. Thank you, everyone.